Music mogul Sean "Diddy" Combs is facing a deepening legal crisis with the filing of a third superseding federal indictment, adding to a growing list of charges already threatening to dismantle his empire. The latest update includes a shocking allegation. Combs allegedly participated in a kidnapping where he displayed a firearm to a female victim. This new claim intensifies a case already centered around sex trafficking, racketeering, and coercion, portraying a disturbing pattern of power and abuse. The amended indictment reflects the ongoing nature of the investigation, with prosecutors signaling that more developments may come. As federal agents continue to build their case, the scope of the charges suggests this is far more than isolated misconduct. It's shaping into a portrait of systematic exploitation. For a man once celebrated for his dominance in music, fashion, and media, this legal battle could now determine whether his legacy is remembered for innovation or irreparable damage. Courtroom shockwaves. Viral misinformation and the reality inside the court. Amid the rising tension, social media erupted with a now debunked claim that Combs collapsed in court upon hearing he could face a life sentence. The video, widely circulated, was misleading. No such incident occurred. However, the courtroom drama was still intense. Reports from those present described a visibly changed Combs, bloated, unkempt, and aged beyond his years. The man once synonymous with luxury and control entered the courtroom in a tan prison jumpsuit, his ankles shackled, his once carefully maintained appearance now replaced by a gray, scruffy beard and a distant expression. The hearing was packed. Members of the press, family supporters, and legal teams filled the room as Combs shuffled in and blew kisses to his mother, Janice, and his children. It was a rare display of human emotion in an otherwise grim scenario. His family's expressions ranged from quiet concern to steely resolve, sitting silently through the proceedings. A desperate plea, bail offers and rejected proposals. Combs's defense team entered the hearing with a sweeping set of proposals aimed at securing his release. They offered up multiple properties as collateral, including his lavish Miami home and his mother's residence. Combs also pledged to forfeit his passport, proposed to wear an electronic ankle monitor, and agreed to house arrest with nightly visitor logs. In an effort to ease the court's concerns, he even promised to limit female visitors strictly to family members, his mother, daughters, and their mothers. But the judge remained unconvinced. The prosecution presented a compelling argument that Combs was not a man to be trusted with freedom ahead of his trial. They highlighted past incidents of intimidation, violence, and obstruction. Their case included disturbing text messages from as far back as 2016, such as one in which Combs wrote, "Call me, the cops are here. I got 6 kids. Please call, I'm surrounded. You're going to abandon me all alone." These messages painted a portrait of a man who, when under pressure, turned manipulative and erratic. Behind the charges, what the government is now alleging. The latest superseding indictment now includes 2 new federal charges, 1 count of sex trafficking and another of transportation with the intent to engage in prostitution. These charges specifically relate to Victim 2, a previously unnamed individual now at the heart of the government's growing case. Combs already faced similar charges from other alleged victims, but the addition of a new accuser just weeks before trial signals that the federal investigation is not just continuing, it's expanding. In total, Combs now faces 5 serious federal charges, including racketeering conspiracy, multiple counts of sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Racketeering conspiracy, in particular, is a complex and severe charge, often used against organized crime figures. It suggests a pattern of criminal activity supported by a coordinated group of individuals. Under federal law, just 2 predicate acts, such as kidnapping, arson, extortion, or trafficking, can establish a pattern. Prosecutors have already alleged far more than that. A pattern of violence and control. What makes these charges especially disturbing is the detailed nature of the alleged abuse. The indictment describes Combs as someone who, when challenged or threatened, responded with disproportionate force. Prosecutors say he used threats of violence, actual violence, and intimidation to control those around him. The indictment includes incidents of arson, acts of kidnapping, and physical assaults, including one instance where he allegedly dangled a female victim over an apartment balcony. These actions, prosecutors argue, weren't isolated. They were part of a broader pattern designed to protect Combs's reputation, silence dissent, and maintain control over his associates and romantic partners. Witnesses have claimed that Combs used both physical force and financial leverage to manipulate women, coercing them into sexual acts under the guise of consensual relationships. Consent or coercion? The battle over narrative. In response to these growing allegations, Combs's legal team has doubled down on their defense strategy, that the relationships in question were consensual. They argue that the women accusing Combs of trafficking and abuse were former girlfriends who participated in a private sex life that, while unconventional, was entirely voluntary. This defense hinges on a critical question. What constitutes consent in a relationship where there is a vast imbalance of power, wealth, and influence? The prosecution says that these weren't romantic relationships. They were carefully engineered environments of manipulation, often involving drugs, surveillance, and threats. This distinction between consent and coercion will be central to the jury's decision. The judge at the center, Arun Subramanian's role. Presiding over the case is U.S. District Judge Arun Subramanian, known for his calm demeanor, intellectual rigor, and experience handling complex cases. Subramanian's courtroom has already seen heated arguments about the admissibility of certain evidence, discovery of electronic devices, and the possible introduction of new charges. At a recent hearing, nearly 100 electronic devices seized from Combs's properties were discussed. The prosecution made clear that the investigation is ongoing, hinting that more indictments could be issued. Judge Subramanian also must rule on a sensitive request. The prosecution wants to withhold the identities of certain victims until trial, citing safety concerns and potential witness tampering. This request reflects the volatile nature of the case and the fear that Combs or his associates may attempt to influence or intimidate witnesses. Public perception versus legal reality. While court proceedings unfold, the court of public opinion continues to sway. Combs's empire, built on decades of cultural influence, has begun to crumble under the weight of these accusations. From business ventures and brand partnerships to public appearances and social media presence, the mogul's once unshakable image is fading fast. Yet, Combs has remained defiant in court. "I'm 100% innocent," he declared at one appearance, pleading for patience and faith in the legal process. For some, this is a man fighting for his life and legacy. For others, it's a desperate attempt to maintain a carefully constructed illusion. The stakes couldn't be higher. If found guilty on even one count, Combs faces the possibility of life in prison. Federal prosecutors rarely bring such charges without confidence in their evidence. The government's conviction rate in federal court exceeds 90%. And with every new witness, every new document, the noose tightens. Prosecutors must prove that Combs knowingly engaged in a pattern of criminal behavior, not just isolated incidents. With multiple victims, digital evidence, and eyewitness accounts, the case is building toward what could be one of the most significant celebrity trials in recent memory. A somber shift in public persona. Once a symbol of success, cultural influence, and musical innovation, Sean "Diddy" Combs is now fighting for his freedom. The once polished impresario behind Bad Boy Records and Combs Enterprises is currently housed at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, awaiting trial on a mounting list of federal charges. His appearance has changed significantly since his days of dominating red carpets. Observers describe him as physically diminished, wearing a tan prison-issued jumpsuit, his posture slumped, with a gray beard and unkempt hair, marking the toll of public scrutiny and incarceration. In a recent hearing, the courtroom was filled to capacity, with Combs's family, including his mother Janice and several of his children, seated in silent support. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Combs acknowledged them with a faint smile and a double-handed kiss. Yet, the warmth of family contrasted sharply with the gravity of the legal proceedings, which centered on a third superseding indictment that broadens the already serious allegations he faces. New charges, new stakes. Federal prosecutors in New York have filed additional charges against Combs, bringing the total number of counts he faces to 5. These include multiple sex trafficking charges, transportation to engage in prostitution, and a centerpiece charge of racketeering conspiracy. These new charges introduce a second unnamed victim, referred to only as Victim 2, and detail specific acts of coercion and abuse, including allegations that Combs used firearms to intimidate and even dangled a victim over a hotel balcony, a chilling echo of past abuse stories in the entertainment industry. The new indictment casts Combs not as an isolated abuser, but as the leader of a wide-reaching criminal enterprise, one that allegedly used force, coercion, threats, manipulation, and substance abuse to exert total control over women and associates. The framework of forced labor and racketeering. The legal narrative is complex, but rooted in the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, a federal law enacted to dismantle organized crime syndicates. Under RICO, prosecutors must prove 3 key elements. 1. The existence of an enterprise. 2. A pattern of racketeering activity. And 3. A connection between the illegal acts and the management of that enterprise. According to the indictment, the Combs enterprise includes not only Sean Combs, but also his affiliated businesses, Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs Enterprises, Combs Global, and a web of individuals employed by or connected to his brand. The purpose of this enterprise, prosecutors argue, was not just to grow a global media and entertainment business, but to preserve and protect Combs's personal power and image, by any means necessary. Absolute loyalty and systemic abuse. The indictment alleges that Combs demanded absolute loyalty from his employees, associates, and even romantic partners. In exchange, those who demonstrated allegiance, particularly by concealing his alleged crimes, were rewarded. Those who defied him faced consequences ranging from career sabotage to physical violence. Prosecutors describe a system in which Combs manipulated victims into his orbit under the guise of romantic interest or career advancement. Once under his influence, these women were allegedly drugged, coerced, and in some cases violently assaulted. The freak-off sessions, reportedly prolonged sexual episodes involving commercial sex workers, serve as a grotesque centerpiece in the allegations. According to the documents, Combs would distribute controlled substances at these events to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes the women were not even aware of what substances they were consuming. Following these sessions, Combs and others involved would receive IV fluids to recover, demonstrating a disturbing level of premeditation and physical demand associated with these events. Logistics of exploitation. Employees as enablers. To execute this system, Combs allegedly relied on an intricate network of employees and contractors. These included personal assistants, security staff, household staff, and travel coordinators. The indictment states that these individuals played essential roles, booking hotel rooms, stocking them with specific items, such as lubricant and linens, coordinating travel for victims, and handling large sums of cash. They were allegedly also responsible for setting up lighting and audiovisual equipment to record these events, implicating them in potentially criminal acts. The indictment points to a larger, more chilling implication. This was not a one-man operation, but a coordinated system of abuse, with many individuals complicit through action or silence. It remains unclear whether any of these employees will face separate charges, but their involvement underscores the organized and deliberate nature of the alleged crimes. The victim's ordeal: abuse beyond physical harm. The physical abuse outlined in the indictment includes acts of punching, kicking, choking, dragging, and throwing objects. These assaults reportedly left victims with injuries that took weeks to heal. But the trauma extended beyond the physical. Victims were allegedly controlled through psychological tactics, surveillance, threats, financial dependency, and public humiliation. Their medical records were monitored. Their housing was conditional. Their appearance was dictated by Combs or his associates. In essence, their autonomy was systematically stripped away. Some of the most damning claims relate to sex trafficking and the forced exchange of sexual acts for money, even as recently as last year. In these instances, prosecutors claim that Combs transported women across state lines under false pretenses, only to exploit them sexually in private residences or luxury hotels. These allegations fall squarely within the definitions set forth by federal law under both sex trafficking and forced labor statutes. Mounting evidence and impending trial. The trial is scheduled to begin May 5, 2025, with jury selection set for May 12th. Prosecutors have hinted at the potential for even more charges, stating that their investigation remains very much ongoing. Among the issues currently under discussion is the analysis of nearly 100 electronic devices seized from Combs' various properties. These may contain critical evidence, videos, communications, financial records that could further substantiate the case. In addition to formal charges, federal authorities have requested protective measures to shield the identities of victims. This is both a legal strategy and a safety precaution, given the high-profile nature of the case and the potential risk of witness tampering. Combs, for his part, maintains his innocence. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges, and his legal team insists that the accusations are fabrications, pointing to the consensual nature of the relationships described. They argue that the events in question occurred in private and among adults who willingly participated. Echoes of celebrity scandals. Passed while the Combs case is unprecedented in scope, it echoes other high-profile abuse allegations in the entertainment world, most notably those involving R. Kelly, Harvey Weinstein, and Jeffrey Epstein. Like those cases, the prosecution here appears to be focusing not on isolated incidents, but on a systemic, prolonged pattern of exploitation. This approach is designed to paint a comprehensive picture of an organized, predatory lifestyle. The risk for Combs is significant. Under RICO, even if he didn't personally commit each act, he can be held criminally liable for the actions of his enterprise. If a jury believes that he directed or facilitated those acts, he faces the maximum sentence, potentially life in prison. The legal gravity. What a conviction means. If found guilty of all charges, Combs could face a sentence so long he may never be a free man again. Racketeering, sex trafficking, forced labor, and weapons charges carry severe penalties individually. Combined, they present a life-altering legal reality. Even conviction on only some of the charges could mean decades behind bars. The government's strategy in this case isn't just about proving one act of wrongdoing. It's about demonstrating that Combs led a sustained and organized criminal enterprise that used threats, manipulation, and violence to exploit others for his own benefit. Prosecutors are known to be meticulous in RICO cases, often spending months or even years compiling layers of evidence. And in this case, the federal team appears to be doing just that, securing electronic devices, subpoenaing witnesses, and preparing rebuttal experts to challenge every aspect of the defense. High-profile silence and the power of the shadow witness. Another fascinating aspect of the case is the potential use of undisclosed celebrity witnesses. While big names like Beyoncé, Jay-Z, and LeBron James have surfaced in media narratives related to separate civil allegations, none have been formally named in the criminal indictment. But legal experts suggest that prosecutors may have already gathered information from high-profile individuals behind the scenes. Rather than calling these figures to the stand and opening them to relentless cross-examination by the defense, the prosecution could use the information they've provided to locate physical evidence, corroborate timelines, or lead investigators to additional victims. This method allows the prosecution to bolster their case with testimony without putting celebrities directly into the media spotlight or exposing them to rebuttals that could muddy the narrative in court. Federal bias or celebrity takedown. A contentious thread in public discourse centers on whether the case represents a legitimate prosecution or a targeted takedown of a powerful black celebrity. Some argue that the federal government has historically shown a pattern of scrutinizing successful black men in ways that seem more aggressive or disproportionate. Others believe the mounting evidence, including multiple civil lawsuits, detailed victim accounts, and physical documentation, presents a strong enough case that transcends race or fame. It's a sensitive conversation, but what complicates this argument is the nature of the allegations themselves: claims of long-term sexual abuse, coercion, trafficking, and manipulation. These aren't minor legal missteps or tax disputes. They involve human suffering, and the sheer consistency of the allegations across years and from multiple sources gives prosecutors what they believe to be a compelling pattern of criminal behavior. The role of Cassie and the sex trafficking charge. One of the most surprising aspects of the indictment is that, despite the dozens of women who have come forward in civil suits, only one, Cassie Ventura, Combs's former long-term girlfriend, is named in the count of sex trafficking by force, coercion, or fraud. Cassie's claims laid the groundwork for what later expanded into a federal investigation, yet she remains the sole named victim in the most serious count. Legal analysts have noted that this might be a strategic move by prosecutors. By focusing the sex trafficking charge on a single victim with a well-documented relationship to Combs, the prosecution may be attempting to simplify their case for the jury, avoiding the complications of multiple conflicting stories and instead highlighting one central example of coercion. A career fueled by exploitation. Diddy's professional legacy is also on trial. Beyond the allegations of personal abuse, critics have long pointed to a disturbing pattern in his business dealings. From the controversial departure of artist Maze from Bad Boy Records to violent altercations in the late 90s and early 2000s, Combs' history is riddled with accusations of aggression, manipulation, and exploitation. Even outside the courtroom, these stories paint a picture of a man who leveraged his charm and power to bend others to his will, whether it was through control of an artist's contract, threats of retaliation, or fostering dependence. This image clashes starkly with the charismatic entrepreneur behind Sean John, clothing, Revolt Media, and other ventures that made him one of the richest figures in hip-hop history. The illusion of the mogul and the collapse of the persona. The contradiction between the successful mogul and the alleged predator lies at the heart of this case. The Sean Combs the public knew, the polished performer, business magnate, and larger-than-life personality, now faces allegations of being the architect of a dark and violent empire that thrived behind the scenes. While no footage has emerged of him collapsing under pressure, his downfall may well be emotional, reputational, and psychological rather than physical. Every court hearing, every media leak, and every new piece of evidence increases the pressure and diminishes the likelihood that he can return to public life unscathed. A public reckoning in real time. As the trial date approaches, the legal proceedings continue to double as a public reckoning. With each new development, the stakes climb higher, not just for Diddy, but for the wider entertainment industry and society's willingness to hold powerful figures accountable. What began as whispers and lawsuits has grown into a sweeping indictment of power abused and trust betrayed. Whether the allegations are ultimately proven or not, the case has already shifted the narrative around one of the music industry's most iconic figures. In a matter of weeks, the courtroom will decide whether this is the final chapter in Combs's empire or the beginning of an unprecedented legal redemption arc. But one thing is clear: the world will be watching, and the truth, whatever it may be, will not remain hidden much longer.